Matthew Dinetclaw with the Intertribal Agriculture Council. Here alongside me is Michaela Young, who also works for the IAC as our development director. And we have the one and only Miss Givens. Miss Givens works for the Native American Ag Fund organization as a communications director. And without any further ado, I'll turn that floor over to you.
Great, thanks, Matt. I think we might have had a little feedback on the audio, but I will just get ready. Oh, I'd like to share my screen if I can.
Now you can. Sorry, I did click that there for you.
All right, thank you. So hello, welcome everyone. My name is Maria Givens, and as Matt said, I'm the communications director for the Native American Agriculture Fund. And thank you for coming to this session on telling your story. So we'll just jump right in. All right, so first, just the agenda for this presentation. First, we're going to focus on the importance of telling your story, especially in 2020, as we're a year that no one thought would be as it is, and that has impacted how we communicate with each other, for sure, and how we tell these stories. And then second part, I want to really jump into how producers can tell their stories through the different mediums that we have at our disposal now. So moving on, so my story, I grew up right there in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. I'm a member of the Coeur d'Alene tribe, and that's my homeland. That's the center of my universe, is that lake. And I went to the University of Washington in Seattle. I majored in political science and American Indian studies. I really wanted to focus on policy and how I could help Indian country through policy. So I went to Washington, D.C., worked in the United States Senate for a little bit, and then moved over to NCAI, the National Congress of American Indians. And that was a really great experience because I was able to work on the Native Farm Bill Coalition. And I know a lot of people through IAC have worked on the coalition, and it was a really defining factor in how I viewed my, my professional development. My mom manages a wheat farm on the Coeur d'Alene Reservation. I love to cook. I really care about environmental protection. And I realized that so much of what I cared about came together through the Farm Bill. And that was when I decided to completely shift course and focus on food and agriculture and policy for that. So I went to grad school at the University of Colorado and with a master's in sustainable food systems. After graduation, I was a freelance writer for a bit, worked on a few articles on food sovereignty and just policy in general. And the opportunity came up to work on communications for the Native American Agriculture Fund. So I think I have one of the best jobs in the world, just telling the story of Native food and ag through our grantees. And for those that aren't familiar with the Native American Agriculture Fund, we are from the Keeps Eagle settlement, and we give grants to tribes, CDFIs, nonprofits, and educational institutions to further Indian countries' engagement in food and agriculture. And so we have over 100 grantees doing a bunch of amazing work out there. And part of my job is to uplift those stories. So that's my story and where I come from. And the purpose of this session, I want to just make sure that we're thinking about stories in a way that pretty much everything is a story. The importance of telling your story is a lot of times that's one of the most important things that you have. I saw in the United States Senate, the people who were able to make the most policy and advocacy change were the people who were really dialed into their story. That this policy isn't working for me, these are the impacts. If this were changed, this could happen. Those just basic tenets of storytelling really make a huge difference on the policy front, on just the communications front of relaying your message to other people. And so sometimes our stories are one of the most powerful things that we have. So I'm going to dive into that in this presentation. So thank you guys for joining me. I want to start off with a quote from one of my idols, Billy Frank Jr., who's Nisqually. I'm actually part Nisqually on my grandfather's side. And he is famous for saying, tell your story, tell your story, tell your story. Billy Frank Jr. was a fisherman for Nisqually and fought in the fishing wars to protect that traditional food for his people. He ended up winning a Medal of Freedom from President Obama, and he was always talking about the importance of telling your story, and that is what makes a huge difference when you're trying to make change, especially in Indian country. So I wanted to start off with those words. And so why do we tell stories? I kind of want to get down to the fundamentals in this presentation. So we tell stories for a lot of different reasons. To convey just a thought, an idea, or a lesson to other people. One of the big reasons is to entertain. The US entertainment industry is the biggest export of the United States. It's a huge industry, and it's just to entertain people with stories. We tell stories to connect with people. How many times have you been on the phone with a good friend and just want to say, oh, did I tell you that story about blah, blah, blah? And that's how we connect with other people, shared experiences through storytelling. And then I come from a Coyote story culture, and that's how we rationalize a lot of our really big, complex ideas. And whether it's from the color of a lake or why a big waterfall is there, we rationalize it through these stories. And so stories are really innate to humans. We gravitate towards them. How many times would you want to watch a movie versus just someone listing off a big lecture? We gravitate towards that form. And so when we think about how we want to convey our messages to other people, whether it's through food and agriculture, through Facebook, or anything, we can really think about it through the lens of a story. So everything is a story. This presentation I'm giving to you today is a story. So your online presence, your website, your social media, even articles or op-eds that you might write, those are all stories. How many times have you seen a Facebook post and you really want to engage with it, but it's not a complete story? You want to know where to go or what to do because it sounds a little interesting and they got your attention, but you want the next piece of it. People are employing these storytelling techniques. As I mentioned earlier, policy. Policy changes happen because of people and because of their stories. I know this from having hundreds of meetings in the United States Senate of people coming with their stories of this thing wasn't working for me and here's the solution. And that is so much more powerful than just a nitty-gritty, dry, legal view of something. And in all honesty, that's what makes things change. Thinking about storytelling, through marketing and advertising. If anyone has watched Mad Men on Netflix, you'll know that advertising is all storytelling. It's just taking what you have and getting people engaged with it in a certain way to get that end product of them engaging with your product, your service, or whatever type of business you do. And also, we all have stories as individuals and as tribes and as cultures, and those are really important too. That's why I started this presentation with my own story. So, what are the components of a story? What are these main things that if one is missing, our brain needs that next thing? So you've probably heard all of these, and maybe it sounds a little elementary, like a little storybook, but these are very powerful conventions that you can use no matter what you're doing, whether you're working at a nonprofit, or whether you're a producer trying to get your goods to market and get people to buy them, whether you're like me and writing about a grantee and the awesome work that they're doing out there in the field. There's some basic pillars of storytelling that our brain actually wants. So the first one is a story arc. We like arcs. We like the beginning, middle, and end. We like knowing that familiar pattern. Characters. We gravitate towards characters. Think of your favorite TV show or favorite movie. It's because you fell in love with that character, their complexity, their what they overcame. And in a lot of what we're doing in Native Food and Ag, our producers are the characters that we want to highlight, that we want to uplift, that we want to tell those stories of. Setting. That is one of the most important parts. Where are you talking about? Who are these people and why does that place impact them? When we're talking about Indian country, this is a really important part because our setting is unique and it's what makes us us. And it's really impacts where the story goes. And then there's resolution. I think this is one of the most, I guess all of them are very important, but one of the most important parts is the resolution of basically what is that final thing that you want that person to know, to do, to feel by the end of your story. So do you want a policymaker to pass a new policy? Do you want a consumer to buy your product? Do you want someone to feel something? Having that resolution in mind before you even sit down to start writing, or even before you put out a Facebook post, having that end goal is going to be really important, because then that will change how you approach the beginning, middle, and end of the arc. So the beginning, middle, and end. These are just basics. People take the beginning to introduce their characters and their setting. And if you think about this, this is how you can write a Facebook post, how you can write a tweet, how you can go about writing an op-ed to uplift your business, how you can, if you're writing a report or making a movie or anything that you're doing, you can employ these conventions because they're so universal that people really gravitate towards them. Introduce your characters and your setting. In the middle, how are these characters overcoming an obstacle? I'll give an example for advocating on Capitol Hill for the Farm Bill. We introduce our characters and our setting. These are producers in Indian country. This policy hasn't worked for them. And then you get to the middle. Oh, they're overcoming this policy barrier by doing this. And then the end, how did these characters change over time? They ended up going to DC and advocating for this other solution. And that's the resolution. What do you want people to do, how to act, how to feel by the end of this? And I know this sounds pretty basic and conventional, but when you think about things in this way, you'll start noticing when people are missing one of these things. And the really good, powerful stories, even flyers or Facebook posts or policy briefs, if you're missing one of these conventions, people are going to start asking questions. Oh, well, what do you want me to do? What should I do for this? So thinking about these different conventions will really move forward anything that you're doing, whether it's policy or business or starting up an organization. So crafting your message. Your message is your story. It's the same thing. Define your characters, your arc, and your setting. It's just the basics: who, what, where, when, why, and what did they do. I don't know how many times I've seen a flyer of an event that sounds really cool that I want to go to, but they don't tell me when it is, or they don't tell me where to go. And then you have to follow up. And then every time you make it hard for your audience to engage with you, you risk losing them. So that brings us to, who is your audience? Who are these people that you want to talk to? And whoever you talk to, you're going to approach them in a different way, right? So think about how you'll talk to, if you're sitting down with a senator for the Farm Bill versus whether you're sitting down with Native youth that you want to engage in your program. You're going to be using different language, and really carving out that audience at the beginning is really, really important, so that you know who you're talking to and how to talk to them. Next, using strength-based language. That's one of the things that I love about IEC's theme for this year, is the resilience part. That is such a powerful word, such a strong word. And if we're focusing in Native Ag on strength-based language, we can get away from some of the not so beneficial stereotypes that we have to deal with. So focus on the positive and the benefits. Using present tense is such a big deal. If we're always using past tense, we kind of put ourselves in the past of Indian country. And again, that's a harmful stereotype that we want to start avoiding. And this is just me. Be direct as possible. Being direct can make sure that your audience is engaged and really understanding what you want them to know and what you want them to do. I don't know how many times I look up a recipe online and all I want is the recipe, but they make you go through all of their trials and tribulations of the day and personal things before you can get to the recipe. And nobody wants to read that or go through that. So just be direct and be straight up. Then also thinking about your resolution. What do you want your audience to do? What do you want them to think or feel by the end of hearing your message? If you're talking to policymakers, you want them to introduce a bill. If you're talking to Native youth, you want them to get engaged and come by next Saturday for a volunteer shift at the farm. If you're talking to tribal leaders, tribal leader, I want you to support this, this, and this. So the more direct you are with your resolution, the more success you're going to get with your message. So again, who, what, where, when, why. Who, think about this. This is your characters. Or this could be you. Is it your audience? Is it both? Really defining that can make sure that you know where you're going and how you're going. So what are you doing? What's going on with that? That's kind of the main part of that story arc that we're talking about. And where? Is this in Indian country? Is this on your farm or your ranch? Is it in DC to advocate? Is it online? Are you directing people to your online store? Where should they go? And then when? This is one that people forget about a lot. Do you want them to do something as soon as possible? Do you want them to do it this season? Do you want them to think about things in the past, the present, or the future? Really breaking down the when and what the time scale is of this can really mobilize people. If something is as soon as possible and you need to get people to buy your product because it's the holiday season and you have the sale ends in 2 weeks, that is a really important thing that your customers want to know so that they can get mobilized to buy your product. And then also thinking about why. This is your purpose, and it's the most important thing. Why should someone care about your message? If you can't answer that question, why should anyone else care about it? So thinking about this as your purpose, as your mission, and really unpacking all of these things before you start one of your big stories. And again, it could be anything from a Facebook post to a report to a policy brief, or to setting up your website. There's so much that that these very, very basic storytelling elements can really provide the structure for you to move forward, and in a way that people will resonate with it. Okay. So again, we talked about this a little bit earlier, but what's your resolution? I don't know how many times I've read something when I was working on Capitol Hill, that someone was explaining this really complex problem and I understood it and I wanted to get involved, but they didn't tell me what to do. If you have a fish on the line, you need to reel it in. This is the way that you get your audience to get to that resolution. What is that final thing? Do you just want them to feel something? Do you want them to learn something? Do you want them to do something? Really understanding that can help you achieve that goal that you want to have. So I wanted to break this presentation up into 2 sections. First, just the basics of here are the basic conventions of storytelling. And then moving into how can you practically do this in 2020? Because we're all online. I'm talking to you through Zoom when last year we would have been in Vegas all together. So how can we do this in 2020 through the channels that we currently have? So these are the basic communications channels that anyone can engage with, whether you're a producer operating your own small business or a nonprofit, or whether you're working for a tribe, anything. A lot of people in the past have focused on print communications, flyers, brochures, anything that someone can hold in their hand. And those are great. And we should definitely still be focusing on that. But given 2020, we're not doing a ton of that in-person exchange of print materials. So I'll focus on social media, web presence, and email in this presentation. So social media, anything from Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, figuring out what works for your purposes is really good. I definitely encourage folks to at least be operating on one of those channels, because that's where people engage right now. I know that there's a lot that goes on Facebook, and if I wasn't on Facebook, I wouldn't really be in the know of what's happening. And web presence. This is a little different than social media. This is setting up your website and also having an e-commerce function if you're a business owner. Thinking about e-commerce, that's how people are operating now. And having an online store can really take your business to the next level. So thinking about e-commerce and how you can tell your story through that as well is really important. And then also email. NAF sends out a weekly newsletter, and that's how we communicate with our grantees and our interested parties. So building out a contact list, I know we all get a ton of emails all the time, but really this is a way that we can communicate with our people and let them know about what's happening. Are you having a sale? Is there a time-sensitive thing coming up? Is there a conference, a webinar? Communicating that over email is actually really, really beneficial. And it's a way that you can market directly to the people that you already know are on your team. They're already interested. They're already excited about what you're doing. So social media and a web presence, these folks might not be already interested, but through email, you can tap into those folks that are already familiar with what you do. So a few tools, these are what I use for NAF, and just a way that things that as a person who's not a graphic designer, whose background is in policy, these are some things that I've found that work for me. One of my favorite websites is Canva. This presentation was actually made in Canva. It's a free graphic design software online, and it's built for people who don't have a background in graphic design. So you can get on there and create PowerPoints, Facebook posts, Twitter graphics. You can make templates. They even have a branding style guide for small businesses. If you need to create a logo and make business cards and then make a brochure and then make a header for your website, you can do all of that in Canva. And it's really user-friendly, and it's made for folks who do not have graphic design backgrounds. So if that sounds like it would help out your organization or your business, I would definitely look into it. And it's really, really easy to use. And it really breaks down a lot of the barriers to graphic design. Next thing for email, constant contact is what we use. You can send professional looking emails to big, large lists. You can segment your lists off based off of anything, whether you're talking to, oh, these are your customers that bought, large packages of what we produce versus, oh, these are our customers that, buy small packages, whatever it is. We put out a weekly newsletter, but you can use constant contact for anything, for a big email blast on something, on a sale or a deal or anything that works for what you need to get across. And then just thinking about an online store, Square is actually a really good tool for, it's that little white square that you put your card through, but they have online store capabilities, and there's just a lot that you can jump into there. So that's one thing that I would recommend. So another way that you can tell your story is through a visual medium, through photos. This is a photo from a NAF grantee, Red Cliff, band up on Lake Superior. And this photo, I love this photo because it says so much without even having any words attached to it. You know that they're going out and fishing, and that's what a typical day looks like for this crew. And so I think that a lot of times people forget about photos or just don't think to put them in their messaging, but really photos can say a whole lot. And the more you use them and the more you build up your own photo library, I think the more effective stories you can tell. And then also thinking about video. I love this photo because that's how people operate now. Everyone has a camera, a video camera in their pocket, and can start making videos about anything and everything. This could be anything from, if you are a producer with your own small business, giving a tour of what your operation looks like. That would be a really cool way for people to engage with what you're doing, or just a video update. Anything like that can be really engaging and create that connection with your audience. So I would definitely suggest just experimenting with videos and how you can tell your story through that medium, and employing those basics of beginning, middle, end, story arcs, characters, setting. So much of that is so much easier over video. And people are so used to just clicking a video on Facebook or Instagram and, oh, what's this about? So don't be intimidated by creating your own videos. It's a lot easier than you think just on your phone. So thinking about all of this through the lens of 2020, I think all of us would prefer to be all together in person, but we just know that that can't happen this year. And unfortunately, but hopefully next year we can all be together. But because of the intricacies of this year, the story of Native Ag has changed a little bit. We're in a different place now than we were a year ago. So for food and agriculture, because of COVID, we have a better understanding as a country about how our infrastructure isn't as robust as it should be. And people are more likely to support local producers, to support people of color. And so we're in a new era. And so we kind of need to figure out how we operate in that space. And then thinking about politics, we have a new president that's going to be sworn in, and that's like, the politics are going to shift and be different. And so advocacy is going to be different. Then also thinking about Indian country, we're in a different era now. And because of all of the changes over the summer around George Floyd, people are paying attention to us in a different way than they were before. And so that means our story is it's different. We have a different landscape to operate in. And so because we're in this new era, we need to make sure that we're communicating in a way that benefits Indian country in that way. So for NAF, what this means is that we want to focus on telling the stories of our grantees and how they have worked through all of the challenges that COVID has thrown at them. And NAF is a pretty new organization. We started in 2018. We got our first round of grantees in 2019. And so they really have faced a lot in this year of COVID. So that means that our job at NAF is to tell the stories of how was native food and ag impacted by COVID, and what can other people learn from it. So that is one of the big things that we're focusing on. And so I'd like to open it up for discussion if there are any questions. Matt, if you want to facilitate some of the discussions, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'm currently taking a look right now. We don't have anything showing up on our CVent form here, but I would like to ask you anyway, just so we can get something fired up. What are some examples of NAF in action now when it comes to telling the story of native agriculture?
Yeah. So we're in the process of collecting a lot of these stories from our grantees. And it's hard to pick just one of what our grantees are doing. I know a fast track grantee of ours, Centerpole up in Crow Country, they've been able to distribute, gosh, it's like thousands of pounds of food to the community through COVID. And it's just really inspiring to see that, you know, in these areas that COVID has hit hard, that the community is just, you know, really responding in a way that is the cultural way of how we take care of our people. And, you know, that's really, really powerful.
Absolutely, it sure is. We have one coming in. Looks like it is a comment, and this comment here says, "Thank you for sharing. Looking forward to the stories that are coming from the grantees." I couldn't agree more. What about you?
Yeah, we are in the process of collecting all of those stories and hopefully getting it onto our website soon so that we can share them all with you guys. And so definitely go like NAF on Facebook and on Twitter, and so that you can see those updates as soon as we put them out, because we want to make sure that we're just getting that out to all of you guys as soon as we can, so that number one, that we can learn from each other, and also just you know, understanding the big picture of native ag, because it looks different no matter where you are. I'm up here in the Northwest, and it'll look different, you know, where you are, Matt, down in the Southwest.
Very true. Very true indeed. Here's another one coming in. It says, "Great presentation. How do you measure success from your communications efforts?"
That's a really good question. So you can get some basic metrics from Facebook and from Twitter. We use a program called Hootsuite. I probably should have made a slide about it, but it is a way for you to get all of your social media linked to one program, and you can post all at the same time. And so that program has really good metrics for how many people you reached. And on Constant Contact, there's a way for you to gauge how many people opened your email versus just, you know, let it slide. So you can do that. And those are, you know, that's the hard data. But sometimes what means a little bit more is someone just sending you an email saying, "Oh my gosh, thanks for sending that out. I really learned a lot," or "How can I help next?" So as someone who's more of an extrovert and people person, I tend to gravitate towards that. And that's how I measure our success, is through that person-to-person interaction.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And here's another question coming in. Saying, "Wonderful presentation. Will it be available to download for sharing with others?" Of course, properly citing you and this conference as the source. If so, comma, when? I think I'll answer my first half for that. And the answer is, yeah, reach out to us directly. That'll be conference@indianag.org. Once again, conference@indianag.org, and I believe they can provide you a copy of this exact presentation from there, because I believe the portal that we'll have available for everybody will simply be just a click and watch, like a YouTube type of deal. But of course, on your end there, Maria, if folks want to reach out to you directly to share the presentation, or maybe even present to the group directly, I believe you'd be more than happy to do that too.
Definitely. Yeah, my email is on the NAF website. It's just mgivens@nativeamericanagriculturefund.org. So if you have any questions or just want a copy of this PDF, just send me a note and I can send it on over to you. And I'll make sure to touch base with Matt and get it into the IAC system as well.
Yep, we certainly will. Oh, perfect. There's your contact info. Yeah, here's another question that came in. This was really helpful. thank you. Do you or NAF provide direct support to people trying to tell their stories?
That's a really good question. So NAF's main mission is a grant making organization. So we put out a request for applications every year, and we'll be putting that out sometime this spring, I think. I don't have an exact date, but keep your eyes on the NAF website and our social media and look for that application. But if you'd ever just like to chat about a project or something, again, just send me a note and we can find a time to talk about it. And maybe I have an answer, maybe I don't, but I could at least direct you to someone who might be able to help as well.
Absolutely. And on behalf of the IAC, I'll also say if you become involved with us as a producer or in some form of the ag sector and you accept our services in terms of technical assistance and we end up developing your deal into an actual success story, then that's something that we'll obviously do everything that we can to capture and promote that for you as well. Here's another question that is coming in, which says, thank you for this awesome presentation. So many things that I didn't consider. Probably more of a comment and a tip of the hat there. Next question says, did you say you used Canvas for websites? Nicely done presentation.
The program is called Canva without the S. And so that's a graphic design software that I use. And it is just really good at creating templates and making sure that these templates are made by graphic designers and all you have to do is plug in your information. So it's really easy to use and it's just canva.com. So that's how you spell it up there on the screen.
Perfect, perfect. Here's another question that came in. What was the name of the suite which enjoins all social media?
Yeah, that is called Hootsuite. Hootsuite. And so I think you have to pay for it, but you can use that as a dashboard for all of your different social medias. You get them all linked up there and you can just write one post and press send or schedule it for a certain time. And then you're good to go. And it can post on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, all those different social medias. And it's really easy to use. And I love the scheduling feature of it. So you can say you have one full day, if you're a producer and you're like, okay, today's my day off and I'm gonna just write out a ton of social media, and then you can plug it into a schedule and then it just automatically does it so that you could be out doing your own thing and it could be posting for you. So it's really great. And again, it's called Hootsuite, Hootsuite. And check it out.
All right, thank you for the question. And looks like possibly our last one here that says, great job, Maria. Transmission of knowledge through story is rooted in most cultures. Your framing of your work as an expansion of storytelling is brilliant.
Oh, well, that's really, really kind. Thanks to whoever said that.
Yeah, I don't even know either. Perfect. Well, once again, thank you to all of you for joining us. Of course, especially a big thanks to Maria for accepting our invitation and spending part of her valuable day or valuable time with us here at the IAC annual conference. I can't say it enough. Can't wait to see everyone in person next year. And of course, don't be afraid to reach out to Maria for anything else that you might need with regards to this presentation. Don't forget to reach out to any of us at the IAC for any assistance needed. And from there, I don't have anything further. What about you?
Just thank you everyone for joining in, and don't hesitate to reach out to me. My email is right here. And yeah, looking forward to seeing everybody next year in person, hopefully. And thank you to IAC for inviting me. This is great.
Awesome, awesome. All right. Well, I'm going to just play a little quick video just showing today's schedule with a few minutes left, and I believe we'll shut down about 5 minutes till. But beyond that, hey, thank you all so much for joining, and we'll see you in the next session.
Thanks, everyone.